All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to HAI's At Work webinars. I'm Zach Noble at HAI, and today we're going to be talking about safety culture in aviation maintenance. This is a webinar we've been wanting to hold since Dr. Key made this presentation at the Vertical Aviation Safety Conference in Dallas last year. We felt it was important enough that we wanted to share her presentation with everyone who works in aviation maintenance. Human factors help to identify areas where and why people might make mistakes. As we all know, mistakes in aviation can result in tragedy. Stories and presentations on human factors often focus on the pilots. Since aviation maintenance professionals are human too, they can break the same rules as pilots or everyone else in the work setting. Our goal is to make everyone aware of this key safety component. We're working on a little bit of a degraded mode today since Dan isn't with us, so just bear with us on the slide deck. We want to welcome Dr. Kylie Key with us today. Dr. Key is an engineering research psychologist with the Flight Deck Human Factors Research Laboratory, AAM 510, of the Aerospace Human Factors Research Division. Dr. Key's work supports effective risk-based oversight and safety management systems in aviation maintenance and inspection operations. Her research interests include decision-making in complex scenarios, computational and statistical modeling of cognitive processes, and the impacts of organizational culture on human performance. Her current research includes safety culture assessment and promotion, reduction of noncompliance with technical documentation and instructions, extended reality applications for maintenance training and real-time work instruction, requirements and assumptions related to maintenance training, competencies and operating procedures, and promoting resilient responses to unexpected events. So with our webinars, there are some protocols that we would like to have everyone follow. Our webinars are interactive. We want to make sure you understand the material, so please feel free to ask questions. We ask that you use the Zoom question module at the bottom of your slide screen. We want to use you can use the chat module, but we request that you use the question module. There will be a time when I think Dr. Key may ask some questions, and at that time, she will direct you to use the chat module. We'll answer questions at the end of Dr. Key's presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll make the recording available on our website and YouTube channel as soon as possible. Sometimes that will be the next day, and at other times that might be the following work week. We encourage you to share the link with people who can't watch it live. So Dr. Key, if you would like to bring up your presentation, you're welcome.
Hello, thank you all so much for the opportunity to present to you today. It is unfortunately telling me that I cannot share my screen while someone else is.
Okay.
Good, now it's going to let me. Wonderful. It would hardly even be a presentation if there wasn't some kind of technical difficulty, huh? And I'll turn on my video so you all can see me as well. Am I good to take it away?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, again, thank you all so much for having me today. I'm really pleased for the opportunity to present to you some work that I've done on safety culture assessment, specifically in aviation maintenance. First, I did want to comment on the introduction to human factors. Zach, you did a wonderful job describing what human factors is. I wanted to say that human factors is involved in every aspect of aviation maintenance operations. And we typically look at it from the perspective of failure, but humans contribute to the vast majority of successful operations. And in this specific human factor that I'm going to be describing today, safety culture, it affects every interaction that we have in the workplace. So I hope that just that little bit helps sell you on the idea of why safety culture is important. I wanted to start by being a little interactive, so I'm hoping that you all will be willing to post into the chat. What is your definition of safety culture? And I don't think I'll be able to see your responses, so if someone else would be willing to just call a few out to me, that would be very helpful.
So far, we don't have any input.
Okay. We'll give it just a little bit longer. And then I have some definitions just in case nobody responds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, but if you do have a definition come to your mind and you're online right now, then please do feel free to contribute to the chat at any point. So from a scientific perspective, we define safety culture a number of different ways. One way you can define it as an index of how much employees perceive that their organization values safety. It can also be defined as the emphasis on safety at all organizational levels, from the frontline employees to senior leadership. I always love to point this one out because sometimes people view safety culture as employee commitment to safety only, but it's really not. There is an organizational wide responsibility for safety culture. So I always like to point that out. And then another definition of safety culture could be the extent to which risk-taking behaviors like non-compliance with SOPs are viewed as necessary to ensure timely completion of tasks. If employees feel that they have to do risk-taking behaviors, it usually means that the organization isn't planning the work tasks well enough. And so that's an area of opportunity for safety culture. We can also take the Department of Transportation's definition of safety culture, which is about how an organization resolves competing demands with safety and the prioritization of safety above those other competing demands. So with that as a little bit of introduction to what safety culture is, now let's talk about why it matters. Well, safety culture is a critical element of an effective safety management system. And I know that not all organizations represented in this webinar may have a formal safety management system, but I know that you all are doing some form of risk and safety management, even if it's not through a formalized SMS. So even in the absence of a formalized SMS, safety culture has been linked to a variety of outcomes for organizations. Some things on the left, these are positives. If you have a more positive safety culture, then this has been linked to increases in safety behavior, employee voluntary reports of hazards, concerns, risks, and events, along with performance, productivity, and even profit. Yep, that's right. If you have a more positive safety culture, it saves you some money. In part, I think the reason for that is because a more positive safety culture helps to decrease things that you don't want to see in organizations, such as non-compliance, errors, incidents, accidents, personnel injuries, and turnover. All of those things cost you money. So by reducing those through having a positive safety culture, it really is good for your bottom line. Safety culture has been ranked as a top human factor challenge area, specifically in aviation maintenance. And researchers in a working group a while back stated that a well-established safety culture is a critical foundation that must be in place before many of the other human factor challenges can be addressed effectively. So I take that to mean that if we're going to address human factors, we need to start with safety culture. As I mentioned before, without a positive safety culture, formalized safety management systems cannot function effectively. You have to have trust and data sharing and reporting in order to really know your risk and manage it effectively. And I wanted to point out some fast facts about safety culture within aviation maintenance operations to really underscore its importance. I told you already that it's a it shapes every interaction that we have in the workplace. But in one previous research study, it was reported that up to 30% of mechanics did not trust their supervisor to prioritize safety. Several other studies have found that maintainers tend to view safety culture a little bit less positively than their other aviation peers, including ground handlers, dispatchers, pilots, air traffic controllers, and so on. So I think that those fast facts help to explain why safety culture is such a top human factor challenge in aviation maintenance specifically. And the research sponsors for this effort wanted to focus on safety culture and really to help operators with knowing their safety culture today, so the assessment, along with improving it. So how are we going to make it better tomorrow? How do we promote more trust between mechanics and their supervisors? How do we make it so that mechanics do, view safety culture as positively as their other aviation peers? Those are some of the questions that we went into this research with. So I hope I've convinced you by now that safety culture is clearly beneficial for an organization, but some remaining questions would be how to assess it and how to promote it, especially in the context of safety management systems. When you look towards how to assess safety culture, there are many tools that are available, but there are some challenges with the existing assessments that the research sponsors identified. So for starters, many of the tools that are available are proprietary and/or costly. They may require researcher or consultant support, not only to administer the assessment in the first place, but also to conduct the data analysis and really interpret the findings and figure out where are those opportunities for improvement. Then finally, a challenge with the existing assessments is that they may not suggest areas and methods for continuous improvement. So, okay, great, we have all this data. Now, what are we supposed to do with it? So those challenges or limitations with existing assessments really helped to define the research scope. Specifically, what we were requested to do is to develop a brand new safety culture assessment toolkit specifically for aviation maintenance operations. We called it the FAA M-SCAIT. It stands for the FAA Maintenance Safety Culture Assessment and Improvement Toolkit. I know it's a mouthful. That's why we called it the M-SCAIT for short. It is supposed to be a standalone, do-it-yourself way for organizations to have proprietary control over their own safety culture assessment, the data, the outcomes, and the actions that you may take to improve following the assessment. The toolkit contains a survey instrument along with data analytic tools that help to identify specific areas for improvement. There's also a roadmap that tells you how to conduct safety culture assessment and improvement efforts. And so those toolkit pieces were developed throughout the course of this research that I'm describing, and they have subsequently been validated, which I'm very pleased to share with you all the results of that today. Pending their validation, which is now complete, we are transferring everything to industry for their free independent use. So FAA will not have access to the data. FAA will not take any control over the improvement actions or anything. It really is standalone, do it yourself, free for independent use. Excuse the fly around here. So that's what we have created. And I can't wait to share more details with you. So I wanted to share a little bit about the science of how we created this toolkit. The M-SCAIT is based on another survey of safety culture called the Snapshot Survey. And I know I spent some time telling you about the challenges with existing assessments, but the Snapshot Survey is really an exception. In my opinion, it's a wonderful tool. It has been used successfully in aviation military maintenance operations in Australia to assess their safety culture for over 20 years. And it has been iteratively refined across time to bring it to its current, really well-established place. So the snapshot survey was developed by Dr. Fogarty and his colleagues, again, leveraging years and decades actually of research. They've tested the tool many times across many different populations. They have thousands of data points that help support the snapshot survey. But it was designed for the military environment in Australia. And so part of what we wanted to do was to bring that tool into the United States and specialize it for civil operations. So that's what we've done. I believe that the success of the snapshot survey is in part due to their reliance on a theoretical model of safety culture. I'm actually going to turn off my webcam because of the fly buzzing around my head. I'm so sorry about that. Just minimize distraction there. Okay, so they have a theoretical model that underpins their survey questions. And this is important because any type of assessment, you want to really understand the relationships between the variables or the ideas that you're assessing. And one limitation of a lot of the safety culture science is that there hasn't been a theory to really help us understand what is safety culture, how do we measure it, and then how do we link that to other important safety related outcomes. And so this model that they have called the job demand resource model addresses some of those limitations. It really makes safety culture more grounded in science. And so I want to share that model with you now. All right, so the job demand resource model has long origins in organizational psychology. And so it was originally used as a way to explain organizational behavior, but subsequently it has been brought on board as a way to explain safety culture. And it states that there are organizational influences which shape employee outcomes. In turn, those employee outcomes will shape the organization's outcomes. And so now I'm going to walk through that model a little bit more in depth. And I didn't come here to do a boring scientific presentation, so I'll try to make this brief. But the reason that I'm showing you this is because this model really helps to illustrate all of the different variables or components of a safety culture, and they can just provide some things to keep in mind if you're interested in doing your own safety culture assessment. So really, I'm hoping that that will be the value for you. So again, the model states that the organization provides influences which shape how employees do their job. There are two categories. There's job resources, which is anything that helps employees do their job better, faster, stronger. These can include good communication, supervision, training, management commitment, which is huge in the context of safety culture, along with adjustness, access to adequate equipment and tools, the ease of understanding and accessibility for documentation like SOPs, and then also the reporting system that's in place at the organization. These can all contribute to employees performing their job better. On the other hand, job demands are anything that can impede or harm employees' ability to do their job safely. So within safety culture context, we're looking at things like role overload, both personally and for your team, workplace restraints. This can be anything like having more paperwork than doing my real job, notice of scheduling changes. There's also things like coworker concerns. This relates to the equitable allocation of work tasks. So do we share the workload fairly? And are supervisors promoted too quickly, meaning that they may not have the experience or competence for their job position. We also have safety concerns. This relates to pressure, and I know that that's a huge one in aviation maintenance. And then finally, because this has origins in the military environment, bullying has historically been a problem there, and so we included it in our model as well. Okay, together, these job resources and job demands help interact to influence employees' outcomes. So within employee outcomes, we're looking at the positives and the negatives. So things like employee satisfaction and morale, those are good things. Employees' overall well-being, that's a good thing. We're also looking at the downsides like strain and fatigue. So these employee outcomes in turn are going to influence the ultimate organizational outcomes like willingness to report, compliance, performance, errors, and so on. And again, I'm hoping that this gives you a flavor for the types of content that should be included in a safety culture assessment. And for your information, all of the variables that are being presented here are included in our FAA M-SCAIT toolkit. So again, using the really strong foundation that was established for the military environment, we have developed and closely adapted their survey for civil operations in the United States. This toolkit is specifically designed for aviation maintenance, and we're getting ready to give it away. So now I want to share with you just briefly the accomplishments, and then we'll get into some specific data that we have discovered using this toolkit. So our accomplishments are that we developed the survey. This includes the protocol of how and who to assess. We also developed the scoring criteria. We beta tested the survey with 4 operators, actually now 5, and totaling almost 1,000 responses across 5 different companies. The data were reported and briefed to our collaborating organizations who participated with us voluntarily. We shared with other FAA lines of business for their internal use and consideration. And we have now validated the survey and the scoring criteria using the beta test data that we collected. Again, those almost 1,000 responses. On the left side, you can see here an example of what the survey looks like from the respondent's perspective. The survey it takes about 30 to 45 minutes to complete. It is a set of items where the respondent is asked to indicate how much they agree or how frequently they experience each one of the topics. And so I'm showing some example items for management commitment. We asked questions like management values safety. We receive managerial support even if following safety rules affects operations, and supervisors and management are committed to our safety objectives. So the respondents of the survey would indicate their agreement with those 3 items, and averaging across respondents, across organizations, we were able to get a good pulse on the safety culture in aviation maintenance, at least for the companies that we worked with. So the survey is an anonymous online link, and it can be completed with any web-based compatible device. What I'm showing you here is what it looks like on a smartphone, but it's also compatible for laptops or PCs and iPads. So now let's dig into the methodology and results a little bit more. So we'll talk about how we utilize the FAA M-SCAIT and how we validated it. The respondents, I'm only going to be briefing you about the first 4 companies worth of data, but I did mention that we now have 5, so I'll explain that. Our respondents were 424 employees who participated through voluntary partnerships with FAA. All organizations signed a memorandum of understanding stating that the data are confidential and that it's only being used for research purposes. So we had 4 companies who agreed to participate. There was 1 large maintenance repair overhaul MRO, along with 1 small one. Those are companies 1 and 4. Company 2 was an on-demand medical helicopter operator, and then company 3 was a military maintenance operation. We also had company 5, that was an airline, but the data are not going to be presented today, and it was the airline's tech ops department. Okay, regarding the survey administration, the data were collected from March 2020 all the way through September 2021. The content of the survey was customized for each participating organization, and it was administered using the Qualtrics FedRAMP platform. That's an online survey software platform that lets you survey employees. If it's FedRAMP, that means that the data are protected and all of that. It doesn't have to be, but that's the government's way of denoting that the data are secure. And again, as I mentioned before, we had a written agreement with all of the participating organizations that we would assure and guarantee the confidentiality of the responses. We also made sure to inform the employees of that before they completed the survey. If you scan the QR code that's presented here, I believe it should take you to the current version of the survey questions. It will not record your responses. The data collection is officially over, but it will let you look at the questions. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll also share with you where you can find a Word document version of the questions, just in case you don't feel like scanning the QR code. So, our respondent demographics were that we had about 36% maintainers and technicians. We had 44% of the respondents front-level leadership, 11% were upper leadership, and then the remaining 9% were others. So this is support departments like parts, tools, SOPs, all of those type of departments that support aircraft maintenance operations. The majority of the respondents had been with their organization 10 years or less. They worked first shift schedule, 9 to 16 hours per day, and less than 50 hours per week. All right, now I'm going to dig into the actual data that we collected using the survey tool, again, through those voluntary partnerships. I know that at first blush, this slide looks a little overwhelming, so I'll talk you through how to read the data first, and then I will brief you on the results from my perspective. So the results are organized into the 4 major categories from the job demand resource model that I presented earlier. So there's job resources, job demands, employee outcomes, and organization outcomes. And what you're seeing here is the average of all of our respondents across all of the organizations. So the numbers on the bottom indicate the overall average from 0 to 10, with 10 being the most positive. And the colors, red, yellow, and green, represent the percentage of people who felt negatively, moderately, and positively about that topic. The red vertical line that you see is the overall average of all the job resource data combined. And so what this helps us do is it helps us quickly identify where their averages are already okay, and then where there may be opportunity for improvement. What you hope to see is longer bars, so averages closer to 10, and more green, indicating a higher percentage of people who had a positive response about that topic. And so looking at the job resource data now specifically, we can see that there's many areas of job resources where the respondents felt like their organization was already providing the necessary resource. This is true for training, supervision, management commitment, just culture, equipment and tools, documentation, and reporting system. Where we see the averages below the red bar or to the right of the red bar are regarding communication and fatigue risk management. So those are 2 areas where the averages are a little lower and less positive perceptions, indicating a potential room for improvement. All right, I have just a couple more data slides. So our next category is job demands. Again, you read the bar chart the same way, so it should go a little quicker this time. Employees already felt positively about safety concerns. Again, this is about pressure to cut corners, essentially, or compromise safety to get the mission done. Personal role overload and bullying. Where there seems to be more opportunity for improvement is regarding workplace restraints. So again, this is about paperwork, notice of schedule changes, etc. Role overload at the unit or team level, and then coworker concerns. So this is about equitable allocation of work tasks and whether supervisors are promoted too quickly before being really qualified. So some areas of opportunity there. Next, we have individual or employee outcomes. You can see that for the most part, the respondents already felt pretty positively about their own individual outcomes, including job satisfaction and morale, along with strain and fatigue. Technically, the averages for the other two are below the red bar, but they're still already close to 7 out of 10, so I view that as pretty positive. This is general health and turnover intentions. And then finally, organizational outcomes is a similar story. So respondents already felt pretty positively about their willingness to report hazards, safety concerns, and events, performance and compliance. The averages are all above 7 out of 10, which is pretty positive. All right, one final is usability. So this was a set of questions that we asked employees to evaluate at the very end. After they had engaged with the rest of the safety culture topics, we wanted them to evaluate not only their own organization safety culture, but also the usability of the toolkit itself. We were collecting that data so that we would know if we needed to make any changes to it before releasing it to industry for their free use. And what you're seeing here is actually all of the usability items. And I know they're kind of cut off, but I can tell you what they say. So respondents felt positively that the survey contains important items to assess safety culture. The survey is user-friendly. They would recommend the survey for industry use. They also felt like there was not too much inconsistency and that it wasn't unnecessarily complex. There was a little bit of room for improvement regarding the time required to complete the survey, along with their perceptions of how the survey results were going to be used by management within their company. Now, of course, that is beyond the control of the researchers involved here. We left it completely up to the organizations how they would use their own data and whether they would make meaningful improvements. But still, these results are somewhat telling. It means that there may not have been good enough communication about why are we doing the survey, what are we going to learn from this, and how are we going to use the information within the company to make improvements. So that is one interesting takeaway. All right, wrapping it all up, I'll just present a results summary. So we identified strengths and opportunities using this survey methodology. For strengths, we found that the respondents, again, there were over 400 across 4 companies. They felt positively in terms of most of the job resources. These include training, equipment, supervision, and so on. They also felt pretty positively about their own individual outcomes like satisfaction, morale, strain, and fatigue, along with organizational outcomes like performance, compliance, and willingness to report. There seemed to be more opportunity for improvement regarding job demands, especially task overload and coworker concerns. There was also an opportunity for us to reduce the survey length as researchers. Again, it takes about 30 minutes at least to complete the survey right now. That's obviously way too long, so we can reduce that. And then there's an opportunity for the organizations who are actually administering the survey to improve understanding of how the results are going to be used, hopefully to affect meaningful change. Some cautions and disclaimers. The survey results should be verified using more objective sources of safety culture information. These could include safety audits, voluntary reports, root cause analyses. The reason for this is that self-reported information such as surveys can be biased Also, we need to be aware of misrepresentative samples. What I mean specifically in this case is that we had a relatively low percentage of our total respondents were maintainers. So ideally, we would have hoped for more representation from the workforce and less representation from leadership in order to make sure that the data were really telling us the real story about safety culture in that organization. And then finally, the data were collected during COVID-19, during the time when operations were just going crazy. And so that may have affected the results as well. It's worth noting that we, the FAA researchers, are still determining how to integrate various sources of information into one picture of safety culture and risks. So although I can advise that a survey should be supplemented with other data like safety audits and voluntary reports, we are in fact still working on how all of those things can come together. And so I hope to come back to another webinar in the future and tell you that we've made meaningful progress there. All right, so for researchers, our next steps will be to develop training and scoring guidance to accompany the toolkit. We essentially want to prepare to hand this off to industry. And so we know that we'll need some operational guidance about how organizations can use this without having the researchers involved. And we also know that we need to identify mitigations for each of the areas of opportunity or improvement there. So, okay, Kylie, you tell me that there's an issue with coworker concerns. What am I supposed to do with that information? That's a valid question. And so we're working on that. Finally, we would like to broaden the scope because this is somewhat narrowly scoped only to aviation maintenance operations right now, but some organizations that wanted to participate with us asked, well, can we have a copy of the survey for our pilots? And the answer is that yes, that is doable. We just need individuals to work with us to help make sure that all of the survey questions would be applicable for pilots or air traffic controllers or other groups. And so what I can say to you for now is that the tool is validated for use in aviation maintenance. We're preparing to hand it off, but we are still interested in broadening the scope so that it's applicable for other types of job roles in the industry as well. And if you have interest in working with me about that, then please feel free to contact me. My email should appear later on, and I'll be happy to work with you about that. All right, some key points covered. Safety culture can be assessed. It's important. You need routine assessment to really inform where your strengths are as well as where your opportunities are. And it's foundational for effective safety management. So really keeping a routine pulse on it is important. We can assess it using the toolkit. We can find areas for improvement, and we're working on the actual how of improving those now. We have provided some initial validation evidence for the FAA M-SCAIT toolkit, and as promised, pending its validation, which is now complete, we're preparing the toolkit for public release. The toolkit will be posted on a website called www.humanfactorsinfo.com. I can paste that link into the chat for you all. And I'm told that the M-SCAIT should be available within the next 1 month. So I'm really hoping that that is in fact the case and that you all can go check out that website, download the toolkit, and then use it. Again, FAA won't have access to the data. It's completely standalone and for your use only. All of the toolkit materials are downloadable like PDFs or Excel sheets. So there's really no software or anything like that that we're providing that even could be used to track your data. Instead, we're hoping that you all will really take the M-SCAIT and use it on your own. Of course, we're here to support as needed, but we really want to empower the industry to assess their own safety culture and make meaningful improvements. So I hope that the M-SCAIT is a really great step in that direction. Okay, that is all of the slides that I had prepared to share with you all today. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime about safety culture or any other human factor topic within the area of aviation maintenance. I'm the principal investigator for FAA regarding that topic, so I'm happy to connect with you all. And I did want to acknowledge that this research was funded and supported by the FAA Next Gen Human Factors Research Division in support of the Flight Standards Service, AFS 300. So they've actually been really gracious about agreeing to post the toolkit on their website and things like that. So if it's all right, then I'd like to stop sharing my screen now, and then I believe there's time for questions.
Hey, Dr. Key, Zach, yeah, if you'll stop your screen share, and then if that unfriendly aviator has departed your area, you can bring your screen back up.
Yes, thank you. I think it's gone for now.
Okay. Hey, thanks for that. I'm going to go back to the beginning where you asked the question to define safety culture, and I want to just read through some of these.
Oh, great.
And I think, for the most part, they're very similar, and you can feel free to comment on them if you'd like. So I'll just read down them right quick. It's a safety first mindset when planning and executing, not cutting corners and taking unnecessary risks.
Yes.
Okay. Another responded with, hold on one second here. Doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Then we have safety culture means understanding risk.
Yes.
Another thought was putting the ego in park. Interesting.
Haven't heard that take before, but I like it.
Yeah. Let me look at a different, I'm going to come back to that, but I want to go to the other box. Okay, that's been. So this was a comment, and I think it's worth noting. I don't know how, so one of the viewers commented saying trust was required for a good safety culture. Then the usability question noted a lack of trust that managers are not going to use this data meaningfully. And the viewer noted that that's very significant in their mind.
It is significant for me as well. I have sometimes joked that if I had just a single question to assess safety culture, it might be this: hey, do you think that results of assessments are going to be used to affect meaningful improvement in your organization? And, you know, just that alone tells you something important about safety culture and trust. Absolutely.
Yeah, another comment is managers must talk the talk and then walk the walk, and often they do not.
Absolutely. In fact, the safety culture research says that management commitment and behavior demonstrating their commitment to safety can explain about 90% of the variance in people's perceptions. So it is by far and away the largest explainer of the safety culture. And it also means that it's probably the area that it will be hard to change, but where there could be real opportunity to use improvement.
So here was a comment, but I think it brings up a good point. This viewer said that he would like to see an assessment just from employees. Is there a way to carve out employees on your survey?
Yes.
As opposed to managers?
Yes, respondents are asked to complete demographic information at the very beginning of the survey. And one of the questions that we ask is about their job role and whether they're in leadership or not. We also ask them, their years of experience in the aviation industry and things like that. But anyway, you could use that one demographic question about their job role to filter out people who you did not want participating in the survey, or you could collect the data from whoever is willing to respond, and then you could analyze it separately for the different job roles. That's something that we've definitely explored. We did publish a report about that, about our data, and demographic comparisons were included in that as well. So it's definitely a feature that's available.
Okay. One of us froze up.
Uh-oh, I'm still here. Are you all able to
Okay.
hear me?
No, I can. Okay, I think you
Okay.
came back.
Great.
Since we still have a little bit of time, I'm going to read through a couple more of these because they're very interesting. So another interview viewer says that it's important to walk the walk and talk the talk, but here's the follow up to that. It's important to close the loop so that you show not only did you listen to the employee, but you also affected some level of change, right? Or at least considered a level of change, I think is a way to put it.
Absolutely. My perspective is that the process of assessment, follow up and follow through is actually as important for safety culture as the specific actions that you implement, right? So you should be using the survey results for some meaningful purpose, and it should not be a whack-a-mole for the employees. Hey, you told us that we have a bad culture. No, it should be, let's identify where we're already strong and where we can grow, and then make those meaningful improvements. Briefing the employees about the survey results, letting them know that you heard them and that you are going to implement change is really, really important. So I agree with that comment wholeheartedly. And I did mention that the toolkit contains a roadmap of how to do assessment and improvement process. Change management strategies like the one that we're talking about now are included in that toolkit. So in case you weren't already familiar with the concept, then you can read that roadmap and it will help.
Okay. I want to ask a couple of questions. So some questions came in, and I won't tell you, maybe one or two or three of these are mine. So I won't tell you that for sure, but
Sure.
I'm going to mix them in there. So one person is asking, can your talking points be used by them in their own public presentations?
Sure.
Okay. Safety culture versus just culture. Do they belong in the same bucket, or should they be separate?
Okay. I believe that a just culture is part of an overall healthy safety culture. In fact, one of the most well-renowned human factors researchers, Dr. James Reason, says there are 5 cultures: just, reporting, flexible, learning, one more, but just is in there. And he says that together those 5 make up a positive safety culture. So I view justness as part of the overall safety culture. I hope that helped directly answer the question.
Okay. Is there a way to quantify accident prevention in aircraft maintenance? Is there a way to, we know how to quantify accidents. How do we quantify non-accidents? How do we know when an accident's been prevented?
Oh, giving me a toughie. Let me think about that one. Can we put that one on pause? But I think that that the short answer is probably that's $1 million question, and I haven't seen research that directly addresses that in a concrete way. But it's a really good idea for what we should look at next.
I think that's been a question that's been around a long time, right? As long as there's been aviation safety, we try to justify or quantify, are our safety programs working?
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to say yes, right, if you don't have an accident or an incident. But as soon as you have that accident or incident, then you have to question whether your safety programs are meeting your goals.
Right.
Who decides risk, right? How much is too much? Who gets to decide risk? If I'm the wrench turner on the floor, and so let me couple this with another question. Risk management, fatigue risk management was one of the low items on the chart.
Yes.
At about 5.75 or so, 5.5, 5.25, 3/4. So that was one of the low ones. So fatigue risk management. So we've identified a risk. Who gets to determine how much risk is too much risk? If I'm the mechanic on the floor and I am in a long day or a series of long days or nights, Who gets to decide that risk? How much is too much? Or how little is too little?
My perspective is that just like with any other topic within the safety culture realm, there's a shared responsibility for creating safety and for managing safety. So I believe that individuals do have a responsibility to speak up if they feel like there's a risk that needs to be mitigated. In this case, it would be their own fatigue level or that of somebody in their operating environment. But they should be elevating that to leadership who also has a shared responsibility for scheduling and in a way that will reduce fatigue and implementing a fatigue risk management system. So I think that the answer is everyone should have a voice in helping decide what is the risk and how much is too much. I know that strictly speaking from the FAA regulatory perspective, we have a performance-based approach. So that means that the operators get to decide what level of risk is acceptable to them.
Because, the risk in aviation maintenance, there shouldn't be any, right? There shouldn't be any because the maintenance regulations are very clear. It's either airworthy or it's not. So the risk comes at with the human factor piece of it. The person installing the component, is it done correctly? Is it in accordance with manuals, which was one of your bullet points, one of your talking points, I think. So in the eyes of the FAA, it's either airworthy or it's not. But the risk factor comes in when we as humans interact doing the work. Either we're too tired, too fatigued, overloaded with multitasking, distracted by things in the workplace, right? It could be your cell phone, it could be with other jobs, it could be a manager who's or a supervisor that's bouncing between jobs if you have multi-aircraft maintenance actions going on. So that risk comes down to maintenance managers and the people that are doing the work, because from the view of the FAA, it's either airworthy or it's not. I can't say that enough. So that shouldn't be accepting risk when it comes to was the job done correctly. That's the answer is yes, the job was done correctly, right? So let me go back to some of the other questions, and we'll finish this up. But this is a fabulous conversation. I want to make sure that we didn't miss anything.
Great.
I'm just going down the list. One viewer asked, with multiple bases, culture can and usually does look different and act different at each base. Can you separate and compare data?
Can you separate and compare data? Yes, we did ask a demographic question about what organization. Well, we know what organization each respondent was from, so we can separate the data. And in fact, we reported each organization's data back to them alone. Then we aggregated it all for our analysis. We did analyze during our final validation whether there were whether there were differences in perceptions across the organizations. And interestingly, we found that the pattern of responses is pretty stable, whether you're talking about a large MRO, small military, or an airline. Really, the trends overall stayed very similar. But I do agree with the point that there can be those important demographic differences, and so the toolkit does allow you to assess those.
Okay, I'll finish up with this one. This viewer says, you have to drive out fear. No one can put in his best performance unless they feel secure. What will happen if I respond to the survey? So if someone goes on to the site and does the survey, are there any side effects from that?
Well, The short answer is no. There are no negative side effects of that for multiple reasons. All of the data that we collected were strictly used for research purposes only, and the confidentiality was guaranteed both for the individual respondents along with the organization. So I will never release the organization's names who participated, and we definitely do not have data at the individual level. The data all went to a third-party contractor to be de-identified and analyzed and reported to FAA only at the aggregate level, and they've only been reported to FAA for the context of research, not for any regulatory or other nefarious purposes. The toolkit that's available online is all downloadable PDFs and Excel sheets. There is no software included, and the data that if you implement the survey, then it will be within your own organization. The data will not ever be coming back to FAA unless you choose to share it with us.
Okay, very good. Well, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's a very interesting presentation, and hopefully we will see it or a version of it again at another event, another HAI event. Human factors is a big deal, and I think we've come a long way over the decades that I've been involved in aviation maintenance and flying. I know that we've come a long way with risk management and safety culture and just culture. So Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you all again for your time and for the opportunity to give this presentation and for the lovely conversation afterwards. It's been very good. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I will go to my share screen and see if I can bring up closing pieces here. All right, so for the next webinar, Dan will be back in a few weeks. He has some interesting webinars coming up. On July 13th, there's a presentation about a new healthcare plan available to our members, offering discounts to individuals and companies. If you don't have health insurance or are looking for better options, it's definitely worth listening in here. On July 25th, Dan will join the HAI team at EAA Air Venture and will broadcast live from the show. I know he's planning on a presentation from Boeing while he's there, and he will be lining up other topics. On August 8th, we'll have a long promised discussion with Clyde Waltman of Leonardo, USA. They have a lot of interesting work going on, and it's sure to be an intriguing conversation. HAI likes to share information just like we did with our webinar just now. A couple of other ways are through our media products. Rotor Daily is a news aggregator that provides all of the day's news about the vertical lift industry right in your inbox. We search through the internet for the top 10 or 15 stories of the day, so you don't have to dig through it yourself. We produce Rotor Daily every business day in the U.S. We also produce a great quarterly magazine. Rotor Magazine goes into much more depth and covers a wide range of stories related to our industry. You can subscribe to both at rotor.org/subscribe, rotor.org/subscribe. Rotor Daily is free to everyone, and Rotor Magazine only has a fee for international mailing. So if you're domestic in the United States, it comes free. Hit the next slide. I believe each of you will receive a follow-up questionnaire soon. Let us know what you liked or didn't like about the webinar. If you have any suggestions for upcoming topics, shouldn't take you too long to take the survey. Since we're a membership organization, we want to know where our members need extra assistance. Please send Mr. Jim Viola, the CEO of HAI, an email with your thoughts and concerns. The best way to do that is to email him direct at president@rotor.org. president@rotor.org. He reads every email, and if he feels necessary, then he will send it down to one of the HAI staff members, and we'll reach out to you. Okay, the HAI at Work webinar is now over. Thank you for attending, and please, you can go to rotor.org/webinar for more information. And all of our webinars are posted on the website for previous webinars. Thanks, and thanks for joining. Have a good day.